Welcome back to Bike Matters, and today we're looking at the hugely popular Hypernaked from Yamaha, the MT-07. Now, the MT-07 was given a bit of an overhaul last year. It's now fully Euro 5 compliant, and the 2022 model is using the same 689cc engine. Puts out 72.4 brake horsepower, peaking at 8,500 RPM, and 67 Newton meters of torque, peaking at 6,500 RPM. Now, it's a two-cylinder liquid-cooled engine, and despite now fitting into the Euro 5 compliant category, it hasn't really lost any of the ferociousness that this bike is famous for. We've still got the same signature MT styling going on here, that kind of neo-Japanese futuristic vibe. I absolutely love the way this bike looks. You can get it in a plain black colour scheme, you can get it in Yamaha Tech Blue colour scheme. This one's brand new for 2022, it's called Storm Cyan, and I absolutely love it. These cyan wheels, they really pop against the greys and the blacks. All the components are now fully blacked out, even the cabling around the dash is blacked out. Everything just looks neat and seamless and slick. Now, they changed the front headlight a little bit in the previous update. It's now got a single LED projector light. It's nice and compact. It just gives it its own kind of unique look. So now the MT-07, the MT-09, and the MT-10, they've all got kind of their own unique style on that front headlight, but they all fit the same vibe. Got a nice sharp tail end here. And the other interesting addition here is this extra catalytic converter here. That's one of the ways they've managed to get the Euro 5 compliance going without really sacrificing much in the way of power. Got a nice 14-litre tank here. It's nice and chunky. It actually feels very nice when you're sitting on it. You know, you can grip it with your legs quite easily. It feels very comfortable and it feels nice and substantial. It'll do around 60 miles per gallon if you're riding it conservatively, but let's be realistic. Most people aren't going to be riding this bike that conservatively, so you're probably looking more around 50 miles per gallon in that case. One of the things that surprised me about the MT-07 was the amount of wind resistance you get. Looking at it, there's not even a front screen, so I was kind of expecting to get battered a little bit, but actually, it felt really good. Even going at high speeds on the dual carriageway, the amount of wind buffeting me was kind of minimal. It's a naked bike, so you're going to get a little bit more than a fairing bike might give you, but it actually felt very comfortable, and that was a pleasant surprise. It can handle that wind. You can go at high speeds, and it's still pretty comfy. We've got 17-inch wheels, and it actually comes with Michelin Road 5 tyres as standard, which is pretty good. They've got plenty of grip to them, and they actually perform a little bit better when the road conditions aren't ideal. And you know, living and riding in the UK, the road conditions are quite often not ideal, so it's a nice touch for this bike. One of the things Yamaha gave a bit of attention to when they updated this bike last year was the brakes. We've got a 245mm single disc on the rear and twin 298mm discs on the front with twin 4-pot calipers. So they increased the size of the front discs a little bit just to give it a bit more stopping power. And I'll also say that the front brake is lovely and light. You just need a couple of fingers, and as soon as you start squeezing it, it'll start to respond. So it feels good, it gets the job done nicely. I'm quite happy with these brakes. The suspension setup is pretty basic here. In fact, in the past, that's been one of the things that people have criticised about the MT-07. It's a great bike, but it's let down a little bit by its suspension. We've got a 41mm telescopic forks on the front, and buried in there somewhere is a monoshock. I think it feels pretty good. It's a little bit soft. I'm more of a fan of firmer suspensions, but really, unless you're a really serious rider trying to push it to its limits around the corners and things, you're probably not going to notice. The only time you really notice is under hard braking. It might dip a little bit forwards, and because of the throttle response on this bike, it's a little bit on and off. You know, as soon as you touch it, it goes. It has strong engine braking, so you can sometimes have that stop-start feeling accentuated by the fairly soft suspension. But again, it kind of, in a way, adds to the character of the bike. It just makes it feel a little bit rowdy, which can be pretty fun. The MT-07 weighs in at 184 kilos, so it's relatively light, it's nice and easy to maneuver. It just helps add to how agile the bike feels in general. The seat height is 805mm. I'm around average height, 5'10". I can flat foot it pretty easily, so if you're a shorter rider, maybe you're on tiptoes, and if you're a taller rider, you might want to check to see how much leg room you've got. But for me, it feels pretty much perfect. One of the changes they made was they just raised the bar height by a few millimeters, and they added 15 millimeters extra on each side, so they're slightly wider. It just means the bike feels really responsive, it turns so easily, it handles very well. Everything feels really comfortable. I mentioned earlier the fuel tank. It's nice and chunky, you can grip it between your legs. It all just feels so effortless to ride. When it comes to tech features, the MT-07 is kept pretty light. Aside from ABS, which is pretty standard these days, it doesn't really have anything. There's no ride modes, no slipper clutch, nothing like that. But actually, when I was riding it, I didn't really miss any of that stuff. It kind of shows you that if the bike is well built and feels good to ride, you don't really necessarily need all that stuff. The LCD display is pretty cool. Interestingly, it's inverted, so it's a dark screen with light text on top, which I quite like. The speedo is nice and large, you can see exactly where you're at. Fuel meter is nice and large also, so you can always see how much fuel you've got. It's got a gear indicator, it's got trip meters, just the basics. Now, if I am being a little bit nitpicky, one of the things that kind of feels a little bit cheap on this bike is the switch gear. Kind of feels more like what you might get on a 125, especially the indicator. It's just a little bit plasticky, a little bit flimsy. It's not entirely comfortable to use, but again, that's a very minor niggle because this bike has so much going for it. The least of my concerns is the high quality feeling of the switch gear, but just thought I'd mention it anyway. Now let's talk about some of the things the MT-07 does very well, and that is how much of an absolute pleasure it is to ride it. In fact, that's probably the biggest compliment I can pay this bike. It's an absolute blast to ride. People say that about this bike a lot. It's got high fun factor, and I now know exactly what they mean. It's got a lot of torque in the low end, so it really pulls hard straight away and immediately, and that will put a smile on your face. It's a lot of fun. It feels really responsive. I talked earlier about how agile it is. You know, you can turn it really easily. It's responsive all over, and it just requires a light touch to get everything to work. Everything just works really smooth and precisely. Another great thing this bike has going for it is the price. £7,200 brand new. It's kind of surprising that you can get a bike that looks this good, that rides this well, for that kind of money, especially in today's day and age. So that is impressive. The obvious comparison here is with the Trident. Fortunately, I have now tried both, so I can compare them. And my honest opinion is that both are outstanding. So really, what it comes down to is what you're looking for, not just in the visual style, but in the way each bike rides. They are quite different. The Trident, of course, it's just under 500 quid more expensive. But for that, you get the ride modes, you get the traction control, you get all that gubbins. Again, you don't really miss it when you're riding this though, but it is a bit more polished, a bit more refined. But the main difference is just the way they deliver their power. Trident has a little bit more horsepower, so at the high end, it has a little bit more go than this does. You know, it's almost got like a power band effect. When you reach that 8,000 RPM around that point, it suddenly goes like the clappers. But until that, it's quite mellow. They've designed it with a relatively kind of slow throttle response so that beginners can manage it easier. Now, the MT-07 is kind of the opposite. This has got much more instantaneous throttle response. It's got kind of stronger engine braking as well. So, you know, it just feels a bit rowdier, a little bit more aggressive. And it actually has slightly more torque than the Trident does. So especially when you're down at the low revs, this has definitely got more go about it than the Trident has. So again, it depends what you're looking for. If you're looking for something that's nice and smooth, but then can go fast at the high end, you might want to look at the Trident. If you're looking for something that's a bit more fun, a bit more aggressive and rowdy, it's the MT-07. Either way, I honestly believe that whichever one you go for, you're going to be happy. Both of these bikes are phenomenal. The MT-07 is a phenomenal bike. I would own one of these straight away, no problem at all. I've enjoyed every minute of riding it, and I think it's a great bike. So what did you guys think of the 2022 MT-07? I'd love to hear your thoughts. How does it compare to the Trident? What do you think of the new colour scheme for 2022, this Storm Cyan? Let us know in the comments down below. We'll check them all out. For me, it's an absolute winner. I've had a blast riding this bike. It's cheap, it's easy to ride, it's got plenty of power, it looks great. What more can you say? Now, if you enjoyed this video or found it at all entertaining, do me a favour, give us a thumbs up. We've got plenty more content on the channel, so feel free to subscribe, ring the bell, and I'll see you in the next one.